I caught her the night she came home with glitter on her collarbone. Not the kind you find at a kid's birthday party or after wrapping Christmas gifts, the fine kind, barely visible unless the light hits it just right. I noticed it when she leaned over to take off her shoes, her white blouse pulling open just enough at the neck to reveal that faint shimmer, and my heart stopped. Not because of the glitter itself, but because Mel hates glitter. She's said it 1,000 times, called it the herpes of the craft world. She wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole unless someone had rubbed it on her directly, and the only people in this house who use glitter are me and our daughter when we make those dumb school projects for her class, and we hadn't touched a glue stick in 2 weeks. So when I saw it, I smiled, asked her how her night was with that casual, fake cheerfulness you wear when you're already bleeding inside, and she gave me the usual spiel. Wine bar with Heather and some coworkers, boring talk about marketing numbers. Traffic was a nightmare. Then she walked past me into the kitchen, dumped her bag on the counter, and asked if I'd remembered to pick up oat milk. I stared at her back while she opened the fridge, the hum of the compressor suddenly louder than her voice, and I said nothing. Just nodded, grabbed the empty glass I'd been using for scotch, and told her I was heading to bed early. The truth is, I lay there in the dark for a long time listening to her move around the house. She didn't come to bed until well past midnight. When she finally slid in next to me, her body faced the wall. The next morning, I woke up early and started cleaning. I needed something to do with my hands because my brain was already chewing itself alive. In the laundry basket, I found her blouse from the night before, neatly folded and slipped between her pajamas. That was strange. Mel never folds dirty clothes. I picked it up and held it under the light, and sure enough, that same subtle glitter was there on the fabric. Just a few specks, enough to raise every alarm bell in my body. I dropped the shirt and went about the day like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't shake it. I needed more than suspicion. I needed to be sure. So I waited. I watched. I started to notice other things, receipts in the trash for places she never told me she visited. Perfume I hadn't smelled in years now making a comeback. Her makeup brushes laid out on the counter more often, cleaner than usual. It was like she'd started trying again, but not for me. Then came the earrings. A pair of small gold hoops I knew for a fact had been missing for over a year. One morning, I saw them on her dresser. When I asked her about them, she looked confused, then laughed and said she'd found them behind the couch. I'd moved the couch 2 months ago to clean under it. They weren't there. What really did it, though, the thing that made everything click into place, was her purse. I had never, in 13 years, gone through her purse. I always thought it was one of those lines you don't cross in a marriage. But that Tuesday, after she left for work, I broke that rule. I opened it carefully, hand shaking, heart pounding, and I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But then I saw it, 2 folded paper wristbands from a bar I'd never heard her mention, shoved into the small inside zipper pocket along with a packet of gum and a receipt for gas. I took one out and ran my thumb over the paper, trying to imagine who she was dancing with when she wore it. Later that evening, I brought it up without accusing her directly. We were sitting on the couch watching some half-hearted Netflix series when I said, "Hey, you been to that new place on Jefferson? Elbow Room or something?" She turned her head slowly, looked at me with a blank face like she was scrolling through excuses behind her eyes, and said, "No, never heard of it." "Why?" I shrugged, told her I'd heard someone at work talking about it, then added, "Heather ever mention it?" She shook her head and went back to staring at the screen. That's when I caught her the night she came home with glitter on her collarbone. Not the kind you find at a kid's birthday party or after wrapping Christmas gifts, the fine kind, barely visible unless the light hits it just right. I noticed it when she leaned over to take off her shoes, her white blouse pulling open just enough at the neck to reveal that faint shimmer, and my heart stopped. Not because of the glitter itself, but because Mel hates glitter. She's said it 1,000 times, called it the herpes of the craft world. She wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole unless someone had rubbed it on her directly, and the only people in this house who use glitter are me and our daughter when we make those dumb school projects for her class, and we hadn't touched a glue stick in 2 weeks. So when I saw it, I smiled, asked her how her night was with that casual, fake cheerfulness you wear when you're already bleeding inside, and she gave me the usual spiel. Wine bar with Heather and some coworkers, boring talk about marketing numbers. Traffic was a nightmare. Then she walked past me into the kitchen, dumped her bag on the counter, and asked if I'd remembered to pick up oat milk. I stared at her back while she opened the fridge, the hum of the compressor suddenly louder than her voice, and I said nothing. Just nodded, grabbed the empty glass I'd been using for scotch, and told her I was heading to bed early. The truth is, I lay there in the dark for a long time listening to her move around the house. She didn't come to bed until well past midnight. When she finally slid in next to me, her body faced the wall. The next morning, I woke up early and started cleaning. I needed something to do with my hands because my brain was already chewing itself alive. In the laundry basket, I found her blouse from the night before, neatly folded and slipped between her pajamas. That was strange. Mel never folds dirty clothes. I picked it up and held it under the light, and sure enough, that same subtle glitter was there on the fabric. Just a few specks, enough to raise every alarm bell in my body. I dropped the shirt and went about the day like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't shake it. I needed more than suspicion. I needed to be sure. So I waited. I watched. I started to notice other things, receipts in the trash for places she never told me she visited. Perfume I hadn't smelled in years now making a comeback. Her makeup brushes laid out on the counter more often, cleaner than usual. It was like she'd started trying again, but not for me. Then came the earrings. A pair of small gold hoops I knew for a fact had been missing for over a year. One morning, I saw them on her dresser. When I asked her about them, she looked confused, then laughed and said she'd found them behind the couch. I'd moved the couch 2 months ago to clean under it. They weren't there. What really did it, though, the thing that made everything click into place, was her purse. I had never, in 13 years, gone through her purse. I always thought it was one of those lines you don't cross in a marriage. But that Tuesday, after she left for work, I broke that rule. I opened it carefully, hand shaking, heart pounding, and I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But then I saw it, 2 folded paper wristbands from a bar I'd never heard her mention, shoved into the small inside zipper pocket along with a packet of gum and a receipt for gas. I took one out and ran my thumb over the paper, trying to imagine who she was dancing with when she wore it. Later that evening, I brought it up without accusing her directly. We were sitting on the couch watching some half-hearted Netflix series when I said, "Hey, you been to that new place on Jefferson? Elbow Room or something?" She turned her head slowly, looked at me with a blank face like she was scrolling through excuses behind her eyes, and said, "No, never heard of it." "Why?" I shrugged, told her I'd heard someone at work talking about it, then added, "Heather ever mention it?" She shook her head and went back to staring at the screen. That's when I knew. I didn't need a private investigator or a GPS tracker. I didn't need to hack her phone. I just needed to look at the details she didn't bother hiding because she never imagined I'd notice. It was the Saturday after I saw the wristbands that I decided to follow her. I hadn't said anything since that night on the couch, kept things perfectly normal, kissed her on the cheek in the mornings, texted her during the day about groceries or dinner, and listened to her talk about work like it wasn't a performance. She told me she had a work lunch downtown, some new client she was trying to land. She was dressed in a green top I'd never seen before and jeans that hugged her a little tighter than the ones she usually wore to casual meetings. Her hair was done just right, light makeup, nothing over the top, but just enough to catch someone's attention without looking like she was trying. She said she might be late and not to wait for her for dinner, then she left. I watched her back out of the driveway and waited 5 minutes before getting in my car. I didn't feel good about it, but I wasn't going to sit in that house one more time wondering if I was crazy. I kept my distance. She drove downtown like she said she would, parked in a garage near the Riverwalk, and walked 2 blocks to a place called Leona's. It wasn't a business lunch kind of place. It was more like a date night spot. Low lights, indoor plants everywhere, patio seating with candles. I sat in my car with the engine off and waited. It was about 20 minutes later when he showed up. Tall guy, dark shirt, sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. He walked fast like he didn't want to be seen, then slowed down as he got close, and they met at the entrance. I watched her kiss him on the cheek and then hug him. Not a quick friend hug. Not a coworker pat on the back hug. She leaned in, stayed there, pressed against him, and then they walked inside. I stayed in the car for 2 hours. I didn't move. I didn't text her. I didn't cry. I just stared at the entrance like a moron, feeling my stomach twist every time someone came or went. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wasn't the kind of guy who knew how to confront something like this. My hands were sweating even though the air was cool, and my legs kept bouncing like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. When she finally came out, they walked down the street together. He had his hand on her lower back. She was laughing at something he said. And then, right there on the sidewalk, they kissed. Not a quick one. Not some farewell peck. She put both hands on his face and kissed him like she meant it. I felt sick. I got home before she did. I didn't want her to see me. I didn't want to see her face. I needed time to think, to figure out what to say. She came home 2 hours later, acting like it was nothing, tossed her bag on the kitchen counter, and opened the fridge like she hadn't just buried 13 years under her shoes. I stayed on the couch pretending to watch TV. I could smell his cologne on her clothes from 10 feet away. She walked into the room and gave me this smile like she was trying to read my mood. "How was your day?" she asked. "Fine. Quiet," I said. She nodded, walked past me, and said something about needing a shower. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there next to her listening to her breathe like it was normal, like I hadn't watched her lock lips with another man that afternoon. I turned away from her, my back to hers, and I thought about how much of my life had gone into this house, into this marriage, into her. I thought about Liv, about the way she looked at us when we hugged in the kitchen or laughed over dumb TV shows. I thought about how all that trust was now a ruined piece of furniture, still standing but useless. The next day, I waited until Liv went to a sleepover and Mel was in the garage folding laundry before I walked in and held up the wristbands. I didn't speak. I just held them out. Her face didn't move for a second. Then her eyes flicked down to the paper bands, and she stood up straight. "Where did you get those?" she asked. "I found them in your purse," I said. "You've never mentioned that place. But I guess that doesn't matter now." She looked away, hands on her hips, jaw tight like she was trying to decide whether to lie or own it. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said finally. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't mean for what to happen? The lunch? The kissing? The new wardrobe? The lying? Which part exactly was accidental?" She didn't respond, just stared at the floor like she hoped it would open and swallow her whole. "Is he married?" I asked. "No," she said. "How long?" 2 months. "Do I know him?" "No." I nodded, put the wristbands down on the dryer, and walked out without another word. I waited 2 more days before I brought it up again. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of silence. I wanted her to sit in it, eat dinner with it, fold clothes while it lingered in the hallway, and lie in bed next to a man who no longer reached for her. She avoided me as much as she could, finding reasons to stay out longer, offering nothing more than neutral chatter about school fundraisers and our leaking sink. I didn't say much, not because I had nothing to say, but because if I started, I wouldn't stop. On Thursday night, I told her to sit down in the living room after Liv had gone to bed, and she sat with her arms crossed, face already hard like she was preparing to defend herself. "So what now?" I asked, not raising my voice, not leaning forward, just looking at her like I would look at someone I didn't know. "I don't know what you want me to say," she answered, I shifting toward the kitchen like she wanted to escape into another room. "I want to know why. That's where I'm starting." She took a long breath, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her sleeve, and then she said it in the most casual tone she could fake. "It's not about you." That sentence knocked every remaining bit of patience out of me. That's a hell of a thing to say when you've been lying to my face and sneaking around on the weekends. "Not about me? Who's it about, then?" "The guy who gets to touch you while I mow the lawn." "It's not like that," she said quickly, but there was no strength in her voice. "Then explain it to me," I told her. "Right now. You explain exactly what it's like." She didn't answer for a few seconds. Then she uncrossed her arms and looked straight at me, almost like she was challenging me to handle the truth. I felt stuck. I felt like I was disappearing. Every day was the same. You were always here, always working, always tired. I needed something different. I needed to feel like I wasn't just a mom and a wife and someone's calendar reminder. I nodded slowly, not because I understood, but because I had to stop myself from yelling. "So you cheated," I said. "You didn't ask for space. You didn't say you were unhappy. You didn't talk to me about any of this. You found someone who made you feel excited, and you jumped right into it." "It wasn't planned," she said. "We met at a work thing. We had coffee. Then we started talking more, and it just happened." "No," I said, standing up. "Nothing just happens. You chose it. You chose it every day. Every time you lied. Every time you showered before seeing him. Every time you smiled at me like everything was fine. That was a choice." She stayed seated, didn't even flinch when I raised my voice for the first time in years. "You know what the worst part is?" I continued. "You didn't even respect me enough to hide it well. You left receipts in your bag. You brought home glitter. You kissed him on a public street. It's like you wanted me to find out." Her eyes welled up, and she reached for her phone on the coffee table like she was about to bolt or pretend the conversation hadn't happened. "Don't you dare pick that up," I snapped. "You sit here, and you talk to me like an adult." She put the phone back down and finally said something honest. "I didn't think you'd notice. You're always in your own world. You barely talk to me unless it's about groceries or the bills. I thought you stopped caring." That hit me harder than I expected. I never stopped caring, I said quietly. I got tired. I got overwhelmed. But I never stopped being loyal to you. I never disrespected you. I never lied to you. She wiped her cheek, then stood up and crossed her arms again, like the posture would protect her from whatever I had left to say. Are you in love with him? I asked. She looked away again. I don't know. That means yes. It means I'm confused. You don't get to be confused. You made a decision, remember? There was a long silence between us, the kind that fills the whole house and makes every sound feel louder. I walked past her into the hallway, grabbed the guest room bedding from the closet, and threw it on the couch. You can sleep out here, I told her. Starting tonight. She opened her mouth like she was going to protest, but nothing came out. She just nodded and sat down without a word. I went upstairs, shut the bedroom door, and didn't come back out. I woke up the next morning with a decision already made. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was just a quiet agreement I made with myself around 5 in the morning while I lay staring at the ceiling. She had disrespected me, lied to me, made a fool out of everything we had built, and I wasn't going to let her walk away from it with a clean face and a neat explanation. I didn't scream, didn't break anything, didn't threaten. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be sharp, measured, and personal. I spent the first part of that day going through our files, finding all the joint documents, the bank statements, the shared credit cards, the passwords she never thought I remembered. I made a list. I wasn't going to ruin her life. I was going to rearrange it in a way that made sure she couldn't ignore what she had done. First thing I did was remove myself from the shared bank account. I moved my direct deposits to a separate account under my name only, one she didn't know existed. I'd opened it years ago when I was thinking about switching banks, and I kept it alive for no reason other than laziness. Now it had a reason. I left just enough money in the joint account to avoid suspicion, a few $100 so the app didn't flash any red flags when she opened it. Then I changed the passwords on every streaming account, every shared app, and locked her out of the shared cloud storage, which held a good chunk of our family photos. I wasn't deleting anything. I just didn't want her to have access to the digital memories of a life she no longer valued. The next step was our home. The house was in both our names, but the mortgage was paid from my earnings, and I had the receipts to prove it. I started digging through every monthly statement for the last 6 years, printing them out and organizing them. I wasn't going to leave the house. I was going to make sure if someone did, it wasn't me. I called a lawyer I had used once for a work issue, told him I needed a personal consultation, and explained everything. He didn't seem surprised. He told me not to do anything illegal, not to move large sums without documentation, and not to tell her I was preparing for anything. I followed his advice. I didn't say a word. I kept playing the role. I still said good morning. I still helped Liv with her school project. I still took out the trash and paid the water bill. But behind that routine, I was stripping away every layer of shared trust we once had. I contacted her boss anonymously using a fake email, sending screenshots of a public post where she was tagged with the guy's name, standing too close at a company event. I didn't say anything directly. I didn't accuse. I just made sure the right people saw it. I wanted her to feel that quiet panic when someone at work pulled her aside and asked a harmless question that she couldn't answer easily. She started noticing things about 3 days in. First, it was the password to our shared Spotify. Then it was the grocery bill coming out of her account instead of mine. Then it was the missing $300 that used to sit untouched in our household fund. She asked once, standing in the hallway with her phone in her hand. "Hey, did you change the Netflix password?" "I updated it for security," I replied. "Can I get the new one?" "You'll have to ask me later," I said, walking past her like I didn't have time. It continued like that for a week. Little things she couldn't quite put together. She didn't know I was preparing folders with every text message I had backed up from her old phone, ones she thought were gone. She didn't know I had old photos of her and that guy saved in a separate email, timestamped, dated, geodacked. She didn't know I had already written the first draft of a letter I would hand her in court if it came to that. I wasn't going to burn the house down. I was going to set the ground under her feet on fire and watch her pretend it wasn't hot. The final thing I did was simple. I printed out one of the pictures I had of her and the guy, one where she was laughing in his arms, her head on his shoulder. It wasn't explicit. It wasn't even shocking. It just looked happy. Too happy. I placed it in an envelope, along with a sticky note that read, "I wonder if he knows he's second place." Then I dropped it in her gym bag. She didn't say a word about it, not that night, not the next. But I saw her expression when she pulled the bag open the following morning and froze. She didn't notice I was watching. She just took the envelope out, walked into the bedroom, and didn't come out for 20 minutes. I made breakfast for Liv. I told her we'd go to the movies that weekend, just her and me. I told her not to wake her mother. By the time Sunday rolled around, the house was so quiet it felt like a hotel lobby at midnight. We were still going through the motions, eating meals, watching TV, doing laundry, but it was all mechanical. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was limited to things like asking about the schedule or passing a grocery list. Mel looked tired, not in the physical sense, but like she was constantly thinking, like her brain was doing the same thing mine had done 2 weeks earlier, running through everything, trying to figure out how this was going to end. I didn't rush it. I waited until Sunday night, once Liv had gone upstairs and closed her bedroom door, and then I sat at the table with the folder I'd prepared and waited for Mel to walk by. She did, holding her phone, acting like she was too busy to notice anything. I slid the folder in her direction and said one word. Sit. She didn't move at first. She just stood there staring at the manila folder, as if she knew what it was but didn't want to acknowledge it. Eventually, she pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. I didn't say anything. I let her open it herself. She flipped through the pages in silence, screenshots of messages, photos, printed receipts, work calendar entries that didn't match the location she had claimed. After 2 minutes, she stopped turning pages and placed her hands on the table. How long have you had this? Long enough, I said. She nodded once, then looked me in the eye. So, what happens now? That depends, I replied. You've had your time to lie, to pretend this was some harmless phase or a midlife crisis or whatever label helps you sleep. Now I want to hear the full truth. Start from the beginning. No games, no filters. If you want any chance of leaving this house with a shred of dignity, you'll give me the respect of telling me everything. And don't insult me with another, it just happened. I've already done the math. She looked down at the folder again, then leaned back in the chair like her body didn't want to carry the weight of the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower than usual. It started back in January. He works at the agency we partnered with on the Jefferson project. We started emailing about deliverables, then it turned into jokes, then personal stuff. He made me feel seen. That's what started it. One night after a client dinner, we kissed in the parking lot. I didn't plan for it to go further, but it did. We met up 3 more times after that. Hotel once. His apartment twice. She paused, waiting to see if I'd explode. I didn't. I just kept listening. I told him last week it was over, that I couldn't do it anymore, that it wasn't fair to you or Liv. He didn't argue. He understood. We haven't spoken since. I let the silence sit for a moment before I said anything. My hands were flat on the table, fingers still. My breathing was steady, but my stomach felt like it was grinding itself from the inside. Do you want to stay married? She didn't answer right away. That hesitation was already an answer, but I let her say it out loud. I don't know, she finally said. I love Liv, and I care about you, but I don't know if I can keep pretending. Pretending what? I asked. That we're happy. That everything's fine. That we're still the same people we were when we got married. We're not, I said. But we could have figured it out. People grow. That's not the problem. The problem is you didn't even try. You went outside the marriage without even giving us a chance to fix what was broken. I was scared, she said, wiping her eye. I thought if I brought it up, it would break us. You broke us anyway. I know. We sat there for a while, neither of us speaking. Then she reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out her wedding ring. I hadn't even noticed she wasn't wearing it anymore. She placed it on the table. I don't want to fight, she said. I don't want lawyers and screaming and dragging Liv into it. You don't get to decide how this goes, I replied. Not after what you did. You'll sign what I put in front of you. You'll move out. And you'll explain to our daughter why this house is breaking apart. You can spin it however you want, but you're going to be the one who tells her. She's going to hate me, Mel whispered. Maybe. Maybe not. But she deserves the truth, not another version of your story designed to save your own reputation. Mel stood up, wiped her face again, and looked down at me like she was about to say something else. Then she changed her mind, picked up the folder, and walked upstairs without another word. I didn't follow her. I just sat at that table and stared at the empty spot where her ring had been, the imprint still fresh in the wood. 3 days after that conversation, we sat Liv down at the kitchen table and told her the truth. Mel wanted to speak first, but I didn't let her. I told her that if she wanted to tell our daughter what she did, she had to do it without editing, without shifting blame, without softening the facts. I made sure she understood that this wasn't going to be a story about two people growing apart or falling out of love. It was going to be exactly what it was, a betrayal. So when Liv sat there in her hoodie, fidgeting with the string on it, looking confused but quiet, I looked at Mel and nodded for her to go ahead. Her voice cracked the moment she started, but she pushed through it. She said she made a mistake, that she had been dishonest,